Welcome. We are super excited to be able to feature Joor today on our webinar. I'm Karen Giberson. I am the president and CEO of the Accessories Council. For those of you who were just meeting, we are a not-for-profit trade association. We're based in New York, but we have members from all over the world. And we know that today you're joining us from all over the world. If you check out our website, accessoriescouncil.org, you will find our magazine as well as a number of other events that we have coming up in the next few weeks. And in fact, a few today. If you're feeling like more Zoom, we have a trend presentation at 2 o'clock today. So hopefully you'll be able to join us for that too. But right now, I have the pleasure of introducing Jen Rosato. Jen is the Chief Customer Officer for Joor and has over 20 years of experience in the fashion industry. And I thought to myself, what does a Chief Customer Officer do? And Jen and her team are responsible for onboarding the brands as they come on the Joor platform, for training and for support throughout the Joor journey. But Jen comes with an amazing experience from merchandising and technical background from brands, little brands like Estee Lauder, L'Oreal, Bumble and Bumble, just to name a few. Jen, welcome.
Thank you.
I look forward to learning more about Joor.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me here and co-hosting this webinar with us. So as Karen mentioned, I'm Jennifer Rosato, the Chief Customer Officer at Joor. I've been with Joor for almost 4 years, but I have 25 years of experience within B2B practices at a number of different companies, as Karen mentioned, finance, beauty, fashion, and tech companies. L'Oreal, big companies like L'Oreal, small companies, startups, both in fashion, beauty, and tech. And so my passion has always been for working with businesses, helping businesses grow, especially during challenging times like now. So it's a special opportunity for me to be here today and share the best practices for what brands and retailers have been doing, not only in the market, but especially on Joor during these interesting and challenging times, but most importantly, with virtual selling. And so let's start there. Oh, let me just, okay. I've already introduced myself. So here's a nice photo of me pre-pandemic with lots more hair. But I want to first tell you about Joor and who we are and what we do for those of you who may not be as familiar, and that will also help give a little bit more of context of the findings that we'll be sharing about 2020 and how that's changed marketing and selling for the industry, but also give you context for some of the best practices that brands and retailers are doing within our platform. We were founded in 2010 with the mission of digitizing the wholesale buying and selling process, removing the burden of very manual, unfortunately paper first, and we still see a lot of that today, the error-prone and costly buying and selling processes that have existed for quite some time in the B2B side of wholesale. Today, we are the global leader in digital wholesale technology with 12,500 brands, 300,000 retailers coming to Joor to conduct wholesale business, resulting in $45 billion in wholesale GMV. What's unique to Joor is that we are truly global. We have offices and our team members in every time zone you may or would like to do business in. When I speak with clients, I like to say that our goal is to be wherever you or your team are, and most importantly, wherever your customers are. And so we have 10 offices around the world. And excitingly this year, I don't know if it's exciting or overwhelming, but we are going to be opening an office in China early this year, and then one in Korea. So we really have been able to expand our presence globally, especially in the APAC region, thanks to our partnership with Itochu. And because of our global leadership position, we have assembled the world's best brands and retailers in one place. From the most discerning luxury brands and conglomerates to rising stars in fashion and accessories categories, we really are able to work with and provide benefits to brands both small and emerging to middle, mid-sized, and to large conglomerate sized. We also have exclusive partnerships with over 30 global retailers, from the very well-established US brick and mortar and e-commerce retailers like Neiman Marcus, Shopbop, Intermix is joining our network as well, and international, as well as also key international retail players, both brick and mortar and e-commerce as well, like Harrods, Printemps, and 24/7. So what is Joor exactly? We are a wholesale technology platform that saves brands and retailers time and money on faster, easier, and smarter wholesale transactions. So on the brand side, we have an iPad app and a web platform that where brands can market themselves and their collections with digital presentation and catalog creation tools. So much of what you see here in the imagery is the ability to create what is the equivalent of what looks like an e-commerce like shopping experience, but for B2B, for your wholesale business. Brands can also take credit card and bank transfer payments for those transactions when they finalize orders. They can conduct fully digital sales campaigns, confirming and aggregating all orders into one place, and then taking payments through credit card or bank transfer through our platform. And then also importantly, is they can see their how their wholesale business is doing and make quicker decisions on how to grow their business with data and reporting tools. We also have a similar product for retailers. So those 30 exclusive global retailers that I mentioned have also invested in software licenses for Joor for the Pro Retail platform, which consists of an iPad app and a web platform where they can make initial product selections, do assortment planning, and visual merchandising and reporting all in one place as well. What's most important and most exciting is that efficiencies are maximized when both brands and their retailers are all in the same place on Joor, because that truly eliminates a lot of the burden I mentioned before around paper, around email communication, lots of the offline non-digital activities that that used to define wholesale buying and selling is now fully digitized on one place. What's also very unique to Joor is sort of how we're growing and expanding and how we think about Joor as this one platform approach. It's our fully digital ecosystem that makes us unique versus others in the space. 10 years ago, we started first with the brand platform. 5 years ago, we were the first to start the retail platform. And today, now we're truly building off of that that approach, and the first in the industry to have built and integrated virtual showroom and data tools in one place, with the goal being of empowering brands to manage all of their wholesale processes and technologies in one place. I like to talk about it. I mean, I'd love to talk about this analogy because I'm a huge Apple user, but it's the same concept as Apple. At a certain point, they created such a mass of technologies and platforms. You don't buy an iPhone for every app you purchase. You don't buy an iPad for every app you purchase. Instead, Apple has done a great job of creating one platform where all of these different technologies can live, whether they create those technologies themselves or they partner with other technology providers to bring those technologies to the iPhone or to the iPad. The same is what we're building with Joor. We've already created partnerships with a number of third-party technology providers to bring really cutting-edge edge technology to our brands and retailers to be able to truly up-level and elevate the wholesale buying and selling process to make it even more efficient and productive for our brands and retailers. So I'll share a little bit more about that later on. But because of this one platform approach, we also have the most engaged network with over 2,300 interactions between brands and retailers happening every day, and 100 million products were sold on Joor in 2020 alone. So just a very exciting, very active, very large marketplace between brands and retailers. So that's it for the initial introduction. I could probably go on for the full hour about Joor. As you can imagine, our best assets, quite frankly, are our team and our clients. We really value our partnerships with our brands and our retailers. So as the Chief Customer Officer at Joor, I definitely have to say that, but I fully authentically mean it from the bottom of my heart. It's the best job I've ever had, and just love what we're doing with the industry. But I want to be able to now share what we've seen from the industry and from our partners, not only from last year, and doing a quick retake on what a review of 2020 and how COVID has led to some pretty exciting digital transformation that's happened in the industry, leading to virtual selling. I'll share best practices for virtual selling, what brands and retailers have been doing on and off Joor to really embrace the virtual selling reality we're in now, and which will probably be here to stay. I'll share a case study of a specific brand that we work with and how they've been able to embrace some of these best practices and show great results. And then we'll open it up for Q&A. So Karen is on the line, actively monitoring questions as they arise. We're going to hold questions to the end, and then we'll have a pretty solid amount of time for being able to have pretty open Q&A. Okay, so let's first go through what happened. What in the hell happened last year? I'm still trying to figure it out myself, but it's no question COVID has changed everything, right? I mean, that's our lives right now. Economies have been hit hard. Brands and retailers are now in recovery mode with fewer resources. We're all changing and adapting. And so what has that meant for the industry? Well, McKinsey, B2B, digital B2B marketing and sales are a need now more than ever. And in a McKinsey study that they did in October of last year, 80% of buyers and sellers stated that they prefer digital B2B, which kind of sounds pretty straightforward and basic, but it's actually pretty shocking considering even today, even before COVID was happening, I'd walk a trade show floor and still see a lot of carbon copy, paper order forms, things still being done very manually in the industry. So 80% is a pretty high number when you think of the reality of what we saw just last year before the pandemic hit, of the reality of the still sort of non-digital aspects of our business. 75% of sellers see digital B2B as a more effective way of reaching new customers. And this is particularly important when you have a database of international retailers like Joor does, and being able to sort of open up a new territory or region for brands who work with Joor. But most importantly, we're not going back to pre-digital days. 89% of buyers believe digital B2B is here to stay. In fact, many buyers I've spoken to have actually shared that they prefer some of these virtual appointments and think that the future will include some sort of hybrid of in-person and virtual, leveraging digital way more than they ever have to be able to make their appointments more efficient, but also to deepen relationships in a different way. So I'll be able to share some specific examples there. So buyers are definitely changing their behavior and changing the way that they're approaching these appointments. We've definitely seen that play out on Joor specifically. Due to COVID, trade shows and brands showrooms were closed, right? So no one was having, or very few were having in showroom physical appointments, especially during the peak of COVID. In-person buying appointments were canceled and replaced with these virtual appointments. Many brands had never done virtual appointments before, so we were all just figuring it out. But as part of that process, Joor became the destination for this much needed digital wholesale marketplace during this time. So it was an exciting time for us, but we saw that activity take place on Joor. Retailers logged in to Joor at record levels. In the past, before COVID, some brands didn't really depend on their retailers logging in. They could simply use their iPad app in their market appointments and place the orders on behalf of their buyers. But here, where they're not having face-to-face in-person meetings, an iPad app conducted order being taken by a sales rep wasn't as useful or meaningful. Now more than ever, retailers really did need to engage, and thankfully they were now open to engaging because of the need. We saw peak growth of retailer logins happen in June at a growth of 182%, almost 200% more retailer logins in July alone than we'd ever seen, and that number continues to grow. We also saw retailer initiated orders increase. This is actually a pretty significant number we track because, like I mentioned before, in the past, brands were typically agnostic as to whether retailers logged in and placed orders or not. Even though it is a huge time-saving benefit for brands, they could simply just place those orders on iPads. But when retailers are going in, viewing collections on their own, placing those orders, it really does save a significant amount of time for our brands, and especially where some of them may have leaner teams, that can make a big difference and has made a big difference for the efficiency of the teams that they're working with now. In December, we saw a peak growth of retailer-initiated orders at over 124%. So really seeing very stronger than ever retailer engagement on the Joor platform. Retailers were almost exclusively digital on Joor. They were discovering new brands, viewing collections, making buying decisions, and doing assortment planning on Joor. Now, that's not just the retailers who were engaging with the pro retail platform, like the Neiman Marcus or Shop Ops who actually pay for Joor. This was predominantly retailers who come to Joor for free at this because their brands pay for using Joor. So buyers, whether they're not paying for it or paying for it, are engaging now more than ever with digital. We also saw that market change. So the dynamics of how market meetings or appointments were happening has changed significantly, and we're still seeing that early on into this year. Historically, summer market, as we called it, would last about 4 weeks in the June timeframe. Last year, summer lasted 6 months. If you ask me, I feel like it's still 2020. So this is the longest year I've ever lived in my entire life. I'm sure everyone can relate to that. But it went from June all the way through November. You could see that on the graph on the right. Brands and retailers were testing first ever digital trade shows, which I'll talk about more in a moment. Virtual showroom appointments became the norm. And what we were seeing was that market appointments were there because market appointments were virtual. They could and were happening quite simply as collections became available, right? So the need for having something ready for a trade show like Cabana or a trade event like New York Fashion Week, those kinds of physical in-person events that created these sort of landmark timelines went away. Right, we have the digital versions, but even then there's a fluidity to that, so to speak. So because there was the virtual showroom and virtual appointment aspect of this, and because also brands were trying to also recoup operations during the recovery period, market appointments became way more fluid, happening not just during a peak moment in June, but in fact throughout the whole rest of the year. And we are still seeing that in this February, March market timeframe as well, where buyers and sellers are speaking to the more flexible level and timing of appointments happening. So with that as the backdrop, virtual selling is a need. We don't know, and I don't think that things are going back to normal. What is that really anymore with the current situation? So with the new norm, virtual selling is now more important than ever. So now I'll shift into sharing some best practices of what we've seen with virtual selling. Best practice number one is pivot, pivot, pivot. That's essentially, if you don't already know or live by this word, I'm not sure how you got through 2020. Everyone had to change the way that we were doing things, whether it was the day-to-day work, myself becoming not only a full-time, working from home full-time, but also becoming a teacher, remote teacher to my children at home. And you can see that based on the artwork that's on my wall that Karen was laughing at before. We've all been pivoting both personally and professionally this year. For brands and with virtual selling, marketing was probably the most important thing that needed pivoting, and that changed during 2020 and during virtual selling processes. So marketing your brand and your collections digitally, but also differently, rethinking the way that you speak about your brand and the way you deliver your brand message was required because you no longer had showrooms or offices or meetings to convey your brand. It needed to be done digitally, and therefore everyone needed to be creative around how that was done. I'll spend the most time on this best practice point because it really was the biggest theme of last year, but obviously I'll also have other best practices to share. The first big area of pivot was trade shows and trade industry events. As I mentioned earlier, buyers are adapting, and they're going online for wholesale buying. One of the first big places for disruption from COVID were trade shows and events, right? So physical trade shows like Cabana or events like London Fashion Week or Tokyo Fashion Week couldn't take place. But we partnered, we at Joor partnered with 16 of the world's top trade shows and trade associations to launch Joor Passport, the industry's first online destination for virtual trade shows and events. And it obviously could not have come in a better time. It was born out of the need of the industry. It's actually, 17 events, 16 partners, 17 events. And, obviously this was born out of the need of the industry, but it really did create a unique and different way for brands to be able to still market their brands, their collections, and be able to engage with buyers in a very different way than they're used to. 1,400 brands marketed their brand and collections differently by exhibiting in one of the shows we co-hosted on Joor last year. But because it was online, they were able to reach a much larger, more global audience than they would have if they had just done the physical event. 41,000 unique retailers visited virtual trade shows on Joor last year. That kind of mass or quantity of audience I'm pretty sure cannot fit through the walls of the Jacob Javits Center in New York. And so the digital aspect of being able to host these shows and open up your brand to a much broader audience during a challenging time like COVID is a great opportunity. So if you want to test this new marketing opportunity, contact these trade shows or associations to apply to participate, and you can take it from there to potentially be considered to be part of these shows. But if you're not a trade show type of brand, or even if you are, virtual showrooms is the definitely other big way that pivoting and changes in marketing took place last year. Brands have needed to take their physical showrooms or their offices and make them virtual, right? So a lot of people couldn't make it into their office. How do you still, into their showrooms, how do you still connote your brand positioning, your styles virtually? So Virtual showrooms is a very loosely used term, but I'll try to define them here and sort of, and most importantly, share the different best practices around what we've seen brands use. But so they can mean different things to many brands, but most are creating essentially B2B e-commerce multimedia shopping experiences. The same way that you think of a B2C, a beautiful, engaging B2C e-commerce experience, that experience, technology, tools, multimedia, all of that that comes together for on the B2C side is now expected and being used on the B2B side to truly create that immersive, engaging experience. Now, this is critical because your buyers can't travel to your showroom. And since you're not meeting them in person, it's key to still give them as close to that experience of being in your showroom as possible. Creative content is critical for this, but also going digital is key too. An always on digital e-commerce experience means you're marketing your brand and collections and are open for business essentially wherever and whenever buyers are looking. So let's look more closely at virtual showrooms and why they're critical for effective virtual selling, because that's a big component of what we saw last year. Virtual showrooms, by definition, typically consist of a digital profile for buyers to learn more about you and your collection, and an e-commerce catalog page or pages and some tools within that. So there's different ways that, that you can achieve that as well. These can feature your shoppable catalog pages can often feature new collections, but also even evergreen collections or pieces that are always available for sale. With virtual showrooms, you can showcase your brand to anyone. So literally make it public and visible to anyone you want, especially if you're trying to grow your business and expand beyond certain territories or regions. There's a level of anyone, anywhere at any time aspect of it. Or you can truly curate and control access, restrict access to a chosen few. It's up to you. It's that power is in your hands with virtual showrooms. On your digital profile, you can market your branding, and you should. And this is what we saw brands do at record levels last year. Again, before COVID, profile pages were sort of an optional thing for brands. Oftentimes, if you would host a physical showroom event or appointment, or you would actually be in a trade show, that was the way that you allowed buyers to discover your brand and your branding, your brand positioning. But those options went away. So now profile pages are more important than ever to be able to really market the branding of your business, your brand positioning, your designer's vision for the brand itself or this specific collection. Linking directly, there's also opportunities, and people are using those opportunities to link directly to press mentions, lookbooks, and also previewing your latest collections. It's a great idea to highlight a curated collection, especially of your best sellers, so buyers quickly get a strong sense of your pieces. Your profile page and brands profile pages that we've seen, especially popping up this year, is really a great educational tool for retailers who may be looking to discover new brands. So it's definitely in the discovery phase of the process for buyers, learning more about you and your brand and your collection, as well as also an education phase for buyers that you may already be connected with, right? So being able to give them educational information so that this sellers on the retail floor know more about your brand heritage, the vision of your brand for this collection, etc. For these tools, less is definitely more typically. Quantity of content is not important than content that pops and engages the buyer to view more and buy. Remember, these are the same principles as B2C e-commerce. So I've looked at a lot of your websites, and the last thing you guys are all doing is putting a lot of photos and a lot of things on it. It's really beautifully merchandised, very nicely spaced out. You're mixing media as video along with stills. The same goes for the B2B e-commerce experience now. You want to do things that engage enough to get them to click and learn more and buy. Lastly, for the e-commerce catalog page part, make sure you're using a platform. It's very difficult to build these types of pages yourself and update them regularly. And then also drive buyer engagement to log in and engage with you outside of a platform like Joor. So it really does make a big difference when you choose a platform like Joor that has easy, intuitive, simple order capture, both for your sellers, your sales reps, and your buyers. So make sure to keep that in mind as well. And I'm definitely going to double down on that one and making sure that you have intuitive and easy e-commerce like shopping for your buyers. Buyers are shoppers too. And shockingly, the wholesale side of our industry has lasted and continues to last even today with way more paper and manual order taking than the B2C side of things. But I often say that if the buyer that you're working with can order something on Amazon, and we all know that we can because we have been doing it in record levels during this pandemic. If they can place orders on Amazon, then they can log into Joor, view your collection, and place an order. That's true for any platform that digitizes this wholesale buying process. We all have been making huge advancements, ourselves in particular last year, in making our shopping pages and experience as quick, easy, and intuitive as possible. And we continue to invest significantly in the buyer's experience on Joor to make it as easy as possible. So definitely continue to look for those of you already on Joor, continue to look for advancements that we're making there throughout this quarter, this year. But make sure that you are choosing the right platform for that as well. Within that shopping experience, use attention-grabbing multimedia content. Not only does it engage the buyer, I mean, this is, cool and interesting. It's different from your regular still image. It moves, it's engaging, it's interactive, but it's also educational, right? So you are again, remember, we're trying to replicate as closely as possible that in-showroom experience. So if I were a buyer, I'd take these sunglasses, I'd probably try them on, which unfortunately is not very hygienic in today's world, but I try them on, I'd pick them up, look around, notice that the front lens is flat while the inside is curved. I can't do that in a still image very easily, but I sure can see that much more quickly in an engaging way when this is rotating in a 360-degree view. So this was something we launched an exclusive partnership with Ordra for their technology called Orb 360. It is a service that sends a mobile 360-degree photography unit to a brand showroom and takes images, both product images like this one, or model shot images with product on it in your own space. And those images integrate immediately with the brand's catalog on Joor, as you can see here on the left. We launched that in April last year. We had already built this partnership with this outside technology provider. This is the first example of an outside technology we've brought into Joor that I alluded to during my conversation about the one platform approach, bringing cutting edge technology like this to Joor so that you can do all of these types of things all in one place and have it integrate with your catalog on Joor. We launched this in April of last year, not knowing at all that COVID was coming. And this was one of the most popular technology upgrades that we experienced last year. Brands are really embracing bringing 360-degree imagery as part of their e-commerce catalog page set up on Joor, and that's definitely here to stay. Video is also another huge virtual selling tool and is being used in so many different creative ways. Here you can see this brand is using a style level video to show the movement and wearability of this garment. We also have accessories brands who are also doing model videos to show, to give a sense of size or scale of pieces on a model. We also have brands who are using video at brand level video instead of style level video, using it at sort of like the brand level to have the designer explain his or her vision for the brand in general, or this latest collection, posting runway shows to also show movement of the various pieces. There's the possibilities are somewhat endless, but it is a huge opportunity and need, frankly, to replicate that in showroom appointment experience online, right? So in a showroom appointment, customarily a sales rep and buyer would be meeting, a model would be walking around that showroom and showing how the piece lies, whether it's a necklace or bracelet or sunglasses, how it looks on the model, right? Instead, here you have a video that does the same thing. Now you've solved another problem of that, another gap that you would have otherwise received without, from not being able to meet in person. So video is a very important tool for replicating that in showroom appointment. So now I'll talk about a big project we engaged with last year. I was actually in Paris for February, March market, and we're already seeing early signs of COVID and imminent shutdown and appointment cancellations happening. And so when I came back and when we heard from our clients about what their experiences were and how we should, what did they need during this time, we worked really hard, went to work really quickly to create an upgrade suite of presentation tools called the Edit. And we launched that in July of last year. Up to this point, brands were using PowerPoint mostly. Some of them were creating microsites, but essentially presentation tool, usually PowerPoint, to present their brand, that brand level sort of video inspiration type of content. And then also their collections, so the actual product shots and the sort of pricing information and data around the product. They were using PowerPoint to present that to their buyers, usually via Zoom calls or video conferences. But that experience lacked smooth, dynamic multimedia functionality. And it also meant that brands were presenting their brands and positioning and collections separately from the actual platform or place where they actually needed to place the orders. So it was a very sort of jumbled, not very seamless experience. You've got PowerPoint, you've got maybe a microsite, and then you've got Joor. Maybe all three windows are open and you're trying to do this all on Zoom. Instead, with the Edit, we've taken away the need to have all of those extraneous outside presentation tools and created presentation tools within Joor. So within the Edit, brands have been able to replicate the in-showroom experience. And that's one thing I want to highlight here is the Edit. For us, the inspiration for it was to recreate that in-showroom experience, all the way from the initial entrance of the buyer into a showroom, where they're walking the floor with their sales rep who's telling them about the brand, the vision for the collection, immersing them into the branding and positioning, showing them a curated selection of styles or pieces, knowing the buyer and their preferences or their previous orders, and then collaborating and communicating to finalize that order and selection and placing the order. So the first thing that the brand does is create this curated collection to each retailer's needs. And this gives buyers that same experience of when they first walk the floor and are led to that the rack or the table where their selection of pieces have been made for them by the sales rep. Next is our style board. And sorry, to go back to this last one, because I don't want to miss some important pieces here. The presentation tool aspect of this is super important because all of the things I'd mentioned before about video, 360 imagery, rich multimedia, and also diversity of content itself is possible on this initial page. So brands have been creating brand level video to talk about, sometimes they have the designer talking about the collection or about their brand in general, or just lifestyle video, right? So that's the sort of immersing you into walking the floor of a showroom or your offices. They're also creating style level video to show the movement of different pieces or the sense of size or scale. And then they're also including the shoppable pieces here, like you can see here, that looks more like an e-commerce catalog to promote shoppability, right? So that's the initial presentation tool. They're using this, some other best practice tips and tricks are that they're not only using this for those appointments, they're using it for sales team education, their own internal sales teams, and especially for companies that have regional teams that, you know, they need to be educated on the latest collection. They're using this as a presentation tool to do so. And they're also using it for education of buyers sales team. So floor salespeople to be able to show them also, you know, sort of the inspiration behind the collection, the data, important pieces of information around different styles and products, etc. So it's been used in many different ways, but essentially shows the power of putting all of this rich multimedia content together and then making it shoppable. The next tool within this suite is our style board feature, which is the digital version of your racking or selection process in a market appointment. It's when the buyer has chosen their initial selects and the buyer and seller start collaborating and ideating about which styles or pieces go well together. This feature on Joor is pretty much like an online whiteboard that allows buyers to pull specific pieces from a collection and then drag and drop style cards around the page to visually merchandise items together. And the important aspect of this is that once they're done with planning, the buyer or the seller can easily add it to their cart to continue to finalize that order. Lastly, the collaborative aspect of this is super important. All of this is being done virtually via Zoom, Google Meet, or Microsoft Teams calls. Whatever video conferencing tools our brands are using is how they're bringing this to life, sharing instead of the PowerPoint slide and the microsite slot screen and then Joor, instead it's just one screen on Joor, doing the presentation, collaborating with the drag and drop style board to finalize the selection, and then actually finalizing the order and adding it to an order here. But while they're doing that, they're also able to engage in commenting both at the style level and at the general style board level. That's really important because that's a huge time saver for brand sales teams from going offline and emailing about certain changes or adjustments. A buyer could say, hey, I love this hat instead of a black sash. Can I make it red? Now that comment lives within this style or within this style board and can be easily retrieved later on for follow-up. Previewing what's coming next for us is partnering with other technology providers on 3D showrooms, truly taking that virtual selling to the next level. This is an example of one of our brands who's in beta right now, doing a virtual tour of literally their showroom. So if you can't come to the showroom can come to you. This gives you the ability to play a video and you just do an entire tour of the whole showroom, or you can do your own guided tour and walk the same way that you would on Google Maps down the halls of the showroom to see the different pieces in the collection. And it also has hotspot capability to deep dive into specific styles like bestsellers or focus pieces where you can get more information and then also click to the catalog page to potentially purchase. So that's actually coming for us soon. We're working on this currently in beta with the hope of launching this by mid-year this year. And so I shared data earlier to show that buyers were adapting, but I also wanted to share a qualitative piece of data from one of our, from an accessories buyer at Neiman Marcus, who said in June market, one of my brands uses Joor and it's the best market experience of anyone I have bought from. This brand has great photos and even 360-degree imagery on a model. They do a screen share where we go through the line sheet and it's just like going through the showroom together. It's definitely the goal for you and your teams to have your buyers say the same thing. And the way to do that are through some of the ideas that I shared before. The next best practice is protect your sales or get paid. COVID definitely hit both brands and retailers. And after all of your hard work, the last thing you want in pivoting your to market yourself to your retail customers to recoup sales, the last thing you want to do is have those sales not happen. And so we saw an uptick in activity around payments. So I wanted to share how you can leverage that tool for managing cash flow and managing protecting your sales. Early last year, we launched payments functionality so that retailers could pay brands for their wholesale buys on Joor via credit card. And small and large brands took advantage of this feature during virtual selling campaigns because it meant they could get paid instantly. And that was a pretty big deal, especially during last year's challenges. They could also operate internationally, which was also good for brands looking to diversify their portfolio of retail customers. We're in the process of currently adding bank transfer options to payments with the addition of ACH and SEPA, which is coming out imminently. We're actually in beta mode for SEPA. And that is also a huge benefit for brands because that means lower fees for faster payment from your retailers. And lastly, at a time where retailers are mindful of cash, built-in 30-day financing when they pay with credit cards is a benefit that brands have been marketing to their buyers to show that they're giving them that additional option and benefit for paying for their orders via credit card on Joor. Another way brands have taken advantage of our payments feature is by taking deposits or partial payments. Some brands are taking deposits to hold any inventory for any orders from their buyers, while other brands are requiring partial payments for large or complex orders. Either option has helped brands with cash flow, helping to offset the cost of production, but they also decrease or mitigate production and credit risk, which obviously is a huge benefit today. Our payment tools also have an invoicing system, and it's not actually related to reducing risk, but I did want to share this because it is also, it's been called out by brands as a huge time saver, especially now where maybe your accounting team is smaller than it was before, or everyone's a little bit busier than usual. Being able to send invoices in bulk in the same place that you're confirming and finalizing orders is a huge time saver and benefit. So I just wanted to share that as an additional tip that we're hearing from brands. And then next best practice is learn and grow. Use data and insights for quicker, smarter decisions. So we're all moving really quickly, but being able to take a quick moment to look at data as it's happening to make those decisions more quickly have resulted in huge time and cost savings for brands. And also sales growth, which is one thing I want to highlight here. So as part of the Joor Passport virtual trade show platform that we launched, we recently launched a marketing dashboard that shares data on buyer engagement with Passport brands, profiles, collections, and styles. So brands can now see which buyers have looked at their collection, who's favorited their profile to look at later, and which new buyers are trying to connect with them for those who are seeking new retail customers. All of these data points are sales leads, sales growth opportunities, whether that means deepening relationships or directing or focusing conversations with current customers or creating relationships with new retailers. And the great news is that we were testing this tool within the Passport platform with the intention of bringing this into the core Joor platform. So this type of marketing information, which is what we're starting with here will also grow in quantity and quality. So you'll be able to see more data points, but also for brands who are not participating in Passport events. On Joor, we also have a snapshot dashboard we call Snapshot, where you can track your overall wholesale business. So whereas I just showed you marketing stats, this one just gives you overall sales and performance for your wholesale business all in one place. And we also have flexible reporting tools that help you take various looks at data points like total sales, sales by order status, sales by retailer and region, and your best-selling products. Viewing this data real time while sales campaigns are actively happening on Joor has helped brands make smarter and faster decisions about production, which has saved a ton of time and money. Oftentimes you're in the middle of a sales campaign and brands haven't taken the time, sales teams haven't taken the time to look at sort of like how we're tracking, which styles are operating better than others. But doing that in the middle while it's happening has really resulted in some great efficiencies for brands who have integrated reporting into their sales strategy. And then lastly, it obviously also helps you understand your audience better. Truly having a strong sense of who are my top retailers right now. Has that changed versus previous seasons? What regions are performing better than others? That also will help you adjust your sales strategy as you're still conducting that sales campaign. The last best practice is do more with less, which I am sure I don't need to tell you that already. We're all living that as we speak. But the brands who have really leveraged technology to save time and money have really seen great results during this time with virtual selling. And so just jumping in there, one of the very basic ways that they've done that is quite simply by digitizing the wholesale selling process by using a platform like Joor. Fully digitizing the wholesale marketing and selling aspects of their job. So unique to Joor is the fact that you create one digital line sheet or catalog once, and that can be shared with all of your retailers, or you can customize it to each individual retailer as you need. If you need to make changes to those items in that catalog, not a problem. Also all done with Joor. So there's no need to take changes and updates offline in an email chain that later you'll have to search for. Maybe you'll find that email chain, but maybe you've lost some money and cost related to not remembering that change. Having this all in one place on Joor is a very powerful way to make your business more efficient and save a ton of time and money, not only on resources, but also on process. And this will also save you time on printing or creating PDF line sheets, having to deal with emailing buyers back and forth, and tracking those sorts of communications. So just wanted to highlight that's sort of a very basic first step that will help tremendously. I just alluded to this a moment ago as well, but the largest time suck and sales loser, unfortunately, can be product changes in the middle of a sales campaign. And unfortunately, we know that happens pretty frequently. It's estimated that 80% of sales of changed products are not recouped. Now more than ever, that's something that I think everyone would want to change, right? Like being able to protect sales, especially when you're in recovery mode, is important. So we have a tool called Cancel and Replace, where a brand can simply alert a buyer of a canceled product and suggest a different product to replace it with. All orders with this affected product will be updated in bulk. So that saves a huge amount of time going through order by order, style by style, and most importantly, suggests a replacement so that you can recoup those sales with a like or identical product. Bulk tools like this are not as sexy like the video or 360-degree imagery that I showed you before, but it's bulk tools like this that really have a huge impact on time savings and efficiency for teams, especially when you are trying to do more with less. So make sure to find platforms that have those types of functionality. And then lastly, centralize your communications with buyers as much as possible. Whether that's in one email address or one email system that you use exclusively for your wholesale business, or ideally it's in one B2B platform like Joor, where you're placing your orders and doing all of your communication and collaboration all in one place. As I mentioned earlier with the edit, commenting functionality means that brands and buyers can real-time chat about a collection or about specific products, and having that communication saved in one place with your order is a huge benefit. We're adding a ton of functionality this year to Joor that is around communication and collaboration that is going to continue to make it faster and easier for brand sales reps and their buyers to continue with that collaboration in our platform. We're running out of time, but I do want to share a quick case study and allow for some questions. And for those who can stay a little bit later, I'll definitely still stay as long as you can for Q&A. But I wanted to share an example of a brand who has embodied a lot of these best practices and has really embraced virtual selling and done well with Joor doing so. This is a women's lifestyle brand. And the challenge that they faced with COVID was that retailers were not fully engaging on Joor, which is a challenge if you all of a sudden have to do virtual selling appointments and are looking for them to log in and view your collections. So they noticed very quickly they needed to do some sort of education to have a successful market in June. They went straight to work really quickly on a solution. They pivoted, like I mentioned before. They held group webinars of their collections on Joor, showing buyers the collections themselves, presenting all of that content that I just showed you, but also educating them on how to log in and view collections on Joor on their own, how to start their orders. So they made it a sort of presentation and education webinar all in one for their group of buyers. Then they gave buyers 24 hours to view their collection and start their orders. They literally removed visibility of their collections from Joor for their buyers after that 24-hour deadline. And then they held phone calls where the sales rep reviewed and finalized the draft order entered by the buyer. So these phone calls were one-on-one touch bases between sales reps and buyers to review and finalize those draft orders. So some of you may be thinking, wow, that's pretty hardcore. I don't know if I can do that. Would my sales suffer? How would relationships suffer? And the great news is that it went off tremendously well. And it shows what opportunity there is to empower your buyers to engage with digital platforms like Joor because they're ready. And when you give them that presentation and education, it can really work. They exceeded their target with 80% of their orders placed on Joor by retailers. The thing that I also want to highlight here is that that's a huge time saver for your sales rep team, right? So being able to have buyers start their orders on their own takes away so much of the back and forth and the sort of administrative work that buyers or your customer service teams might be engaging in to start those initial orders. But most importantly, they increased sales by 202% and generated 3.5 times their average order value. So interestingly, when you put the power in the hands of the buyer, they actually ordered more than they would have before. When guided by a sales rep. That's not to say remove the sales rep from the equation at all, and I'll tell you why. But it does show that being able to empower and educate your buyers to engage more in this process could be a huge benefit. All of so key takeaways is that all of their orders were in by the deadline. No one missed the deadline. And that gave them better production visibility and decisions way more quickly than they would have in the past, where that sort of like buying process would drag on until they could finally finalize the last order from the straggling buyers. Time spent with retailers during calls was also more meaningful. So when they took away the administrative sort of straightforward aspect of of just looking at the collection, you know, coming into the showroom, doing that one by one with every buyer, showing them the collection. It's the same way every time. When you took that part away and put that in the hands of the retailers, it enabled their sales reps to have much more meaningful conversations about strategy, why they're buying the pieces they're buying, how that's different from previous purchases, etc. And so this has definitely turned into a long-term plan for them that for post-COVID. They're going to be launching their collections virtually going forward and using annual visits to retailers instead of that being the traditional sort of collection viewing and selecting. Instead, they're using that for strategy and relationship building. So really making much more meaningful relationships with their buyers. So in summary, these are all of the best practices I shared. I spent the most time on the pivot part about marketing. Content is definitely king or queen. And that's a really big way to make a big difference and trying to replicate that in showroom experience. But all of these other operational tools will really help with making sure that you protect your sales, that you're also growing your sales, leveraging data and insights, and trying to leverage technology as much as possible to be more efficient and productive. So doing more with less. So with that, I just want to thank you for taking the time to spend with me and allow you to share these best practices. If you have more questions and you're not already on Joor and want to speak with someone to get a demo or hear more about these best practices, email us at sales@joor.com. Or if you have more questions for me about these best practices and already on Joor and want to talk more about it, please do contact me directly at j.rosado@joor.com. And so now we'll open it up for questions. I think we just are at time for the webinar, but we'll leave it to Karen as to how we manage that.
You know, we have a lot of questions, and I appreciate, first of all, how engaged everybody was. And I took a lot of notes. So I'm going to try to lump some of the questions together. And I would say one of the trends that I saw in the questions was, I'm a new brand. How do you promote me, and how can I promote myself on Joor? So what tools might there be? You know, can I send a mass email out? How does that work?
Yep. New brands, we have, let's see, there's a few different ways. First and foremost, I will always say that Joor is first and foremost a wholesale selling platform, right? So new brands, especially with smaller teams, should be looking at this as a way to make your process out of the gates more efficient and productive so that you're not wasting cash on, and you know, I would never say waste cash on people, but obviously when you're a startup, a new business, you do have to be mindful of where you're spending your money and trying not to throw people at the problem is what we sort of say in the tech world. And so where you can leverage technology very early and integrate that into your operations and your process to be as efficient as possible with a smaller team, a platform like Joor will be a huge benefit. So I do like to focus brands that are small and emerging first on the using Joor as that sort of wholesale selling platform, being able to digitize things saves hundreds and thousands of dollars on printing line sheets or dealing with the sort of cumbersome back and forth of email communication, et cetera. As far as Joor marketing and sort of the marketplace, new initiatives like Joor Passport is a big way that new brands have been able to essentially leverage trade show events as they would before as a way to introduce themselves as a new brand to the industry. And that's definitely one way to do so, especially from an online perspective where, like I mentioned before, you have a much broader audience than you would have had you gone to just the one trade show in a specific region or market and you're only limited to whoever travels to that event. So Passport is definitely one way to be able to market yourself as a new brand. Our connections-based platform, similar to like a LinkedIn or Facebook, where you can research, discover, and connect with retailers that are on Joor, is a way for you to try to sort of build relationships. but I would say that, that shouldn't be the primary reason why you use a platform like Joor, because we don't position ourselves as a sort of marketing marketplace. It's a full sort of like business, B2B business platform.
Okay, I'm going to turn it around because we clearly had a couple of retailers on the call. How does
Great.
the retailer connect with?
Great question. So great, awesome to hear that. Retailers, we welcome retailers often and all the time, whether they are introduced to Joor via the brands who join Joor's brand platform. So they bring their retailers with them, and those retailers for free join the network. So if you're already connected to a brand using Joor, you may already have a login. And if you don't, we can definitely get you one. And we are actually regularly conducting webinars for those retailers to educate them on how, you've got to log into Joor, here's how to log in, here's how you can view collections and engage with your brands. As part of the Passport program, we also heavily market directly to buyers to increase the audience size. That's a huge benefit for the brands who are exhibiting. So between ourselves and the trade show or association partners that we work with, we co-market together to get the word out around these events that are happening. So as a buyer, I would highly recommend you visit Joor Passport, check out the shows that are there, register to attend and discover. And those are great tools with amazing functionality to discover new brands, being able to preview their collections and shop for with those who make that available within the trade show.
Great. So there was a great question early on about data and reporting tools. So what does one receive?
So first, there's the Snapshot Dashboard that I showed before that gives you sort of, that's more of a BI tool or BI business intelligence, data visualization. It's sort of all the rage right now. Being able to visualize the hard data in graphs and charts and easy to digest tidbits of information. That gives you sort of like it's a snapshot of your business, right? So the minute you log into Joor, the page that a brand goes to is their snapshot. So you can see key data points like total sales, total wholesale sales, but also broken down by status of the orders. So then you can also take action and say, hey, I've got a good chunk of my sales is still in pending order status. My sales team has to go start to follow up and close those orders out for us to book this quarter. Also sales by region. So being able to say, holy cow, Germany is hot for me right now. Maybe I should go after more German retailers. I never saw that coming. How do I market more to Germany? Same thing for, retailers. Maybe Neiman Marcus was number 2 in your book. Now they're number 1. And now they're your most important client, being able to see the status of your business by retailer, all the way down to product level, which are your best sellers as they're happening. So that's within Snapshot. We sort of curate data from all of our data sources into a snapshot image. So there can't be too much there because it's meant to be a highlight reel kind of thing. But within the reporting functionality is where you can get super deep. That's where like a data analyst on your team or someone who's a little bit more of the operations or finance person at a brand might want to do a little bit more digging, because then you can do sales by, it's essentially one big pivot table function. It truly actually acts like a pivot table. So you can make a report from literally anything. And create filters, groupings, etc. So anything that you put in Joor can be reported on, essentially based on sales and sales by category, sales by region, etc. Unit sales, so which are your top sellers, etc.
So I know you mentioned that you can be anywhere and sign up on Joor, because we definitely had some questions about international, but a recurring question had to do with payments and currency. How does that work? I list in dollars, but I'm selling to someone
Yeah.
overseas.
Yeah, just by the nature of Joor, we have what we call price types. So you simply can assign a different price type for your retailer. So you may sell in and decide what that sort of cross-currency sale looks like. So you may sell in dollars, but this buyer wants to pay in pounds. It's all based on how you set that customer up in the system. So once you set them up that way once, all of the orders get processed that way. So you don't have to constantly sort of change that and deal with that along the way. With payments, we've partnered, it's another example of another third-party technology provider we partnered with to bring that technology to Joor. That partner is Stripe. It's one of the world's leading payment processors, and they currently accept 135 currencies, I think. So it's pretty much all, all of the major currencies. Anything that they accept can be processed through Joor. And we have a dedicated payments team who can also help with more hand holding in that direction, because we know that's an important part of people's process. So if there are more questions there, I can definitely direct people in that direction. But generally speaking, we have pretty extensive currency coverage and the ability to do cross-currency transactions.
That's great. Now, we did get a couple questions about, are there different levels of participation? So like when you were showing the video, you were talking about Pro Plus.
Yes.
What, is there a way to look at the features that come with the different levels?
Yeah, great. Glad that you noticed. With Joor, we have our base program is called Joor Pro. I sort of referred to it a few times when I said pro retail or like pro brand. So when you sign on to or subscribe to our software, you get there's the pro plan, which is sort of like the base level, and the base level has all, basically all of the bells and whistles that I mentioned before. It's creating digitized catalog pages, creating a custom profile, all of that sort of the basics of the virtual showroom functionality, still images, and unlimited still images per style, images in your profile page. I think those are also unlimited as well. And the ability to take orders, track them, and all of the reporting suite features. The ability to also connect with, and manage already existing customer relationships also comes off the shelf with Joor Pro on the brand side. There's also Joor Pro on the retail side, and that comes with it sort of your initial purchase or selection tools, assortment planning, and visual merchandising. Pro Plus is what we introduced last year when we launched the edit, the ability to then have a more curated presentation and education tool process that sort of like that replicated the in-showroom experience. That sort of rich multimedia, cross-brand, cross-collection type of tool was the upgrade that we introduced last year, which includes the ability to add style level video in your catalog pages, as well as also the rich multimedia content within the edit tool itself. Other upgrades are things like Orb 360, which is the 360 degree imagery. Oftentimes when they're outside, sort of partners to us, we're simply just sort of making that introduction and selling that sort of upgrade as a one-off kind of situation, because it's kind of outside to the Joor subscription, but we make it easy so that your invoice is all to one place and it's all within one platform.
That's great. I guess the last question that might be a general question, there was a lot of very specific questions, and for the specific questions, I tossed your email. I shared your email liberally with the team, and you're all going to get a follow-up. You've got a recording, and you'll get the contact information for the team at Joor, so we can answer all of your questions, because there were some really, really good ones.
Awesome.
And it really just has to do with costs. And I'm guessing that with the different levels, there's different costs, and there's a solution for big and small?
Yeah. So generally speaking, our platform starts at $10,000, but it's a user-based pricing sort of structure, just like other technology software subscriptions. So it depends on how many users you have, how many brands you might be bringing on to Joor. And so we'll work with you to customize based on what your needs are for the size of your business and what your goals are for the platform.
Well, right now, big brands are small. If you're not going to trade shows, you're saving that money. It's a good, that
Yeah,
your
typically, even at for a small brand with $10,000, to your point, that's a fraction of the cost of a trade show or event, and you're actually getting increasing sales. And also, oftentimes, again, I'm not saying sort of replace technology with people with technology, but we have seen brands grow sales while not having to triple the size of their team, right? So being able to use Joor as a way to be more productive, it starts to pay itself pretty quickly by not having to hire people to do the same sort of manual processes brands were doing before.
Well, I can't thank you enough for your time today.
You're so
Just
welcome.
an amazing amount of information and capabilities. And I mean, who would have thought that, this is the way we would need to be shopping? We're
Yeah,
a touchy-feely world, but right now, I've got to tell you, some of the examples you presented were, if you can't touch it and feel it, this is an amazing option. And I also believe, because we've talked to a lot of our retailers, I think that the whole travel, where they go, how they see things is going to change going forward.
completely,
So,
completely.
no matter how you think about selling your product for all of our wholesale partners, you need to start thinking about it in a different way than what it was before.
Yeah, I don't think that we're
Um,
going back to normal, like I mentioned before. The new norm is going to have aspects of this, and so it's a matter of figuring out, which makes sense for you, what is possible for you. Some people are definitely investing and going all out, and camera people and video taking production teams within their showrooms to truly make it feel like a big production. Keep it simple for what your brands are capable of doing. And at the end of the day, the thing that I say is the only thing we can't replace is smell. Brands would have candles in their showroom to create that immersive experience. You can't replicate smell on a website, but you pretty much
Not
can
yet.
do everything else. Not yet. We will figure it out and put
Not
it
yet.
on Joor. But everything else is replicatable and not without a lot of burden, because of how much technology has advanced these days. People are shooting entire films on an iPhone. We can certainly figure out how to do some style level video that looks engaging and high quality production with lower cost these days. So it's just a matter of having a strategy and using your time wisely.
So I'm going to encourage everyone, again, get in touch with Jen and her team, and they'll be able to answer your questions and figure out what solution's best for you. I toss my email in the mix. You can also go to accessoriescouncil.org. We have a number of events coming up. Most of them are free. Hopefully we'll see you there. And again, thank you for spending your time. Thank you, Jen.
Thank
Great
you so much. Thanks everyone for
to
joining.
see you.
Have a great day, Karen.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye now.